This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls on this Anything Goes Friday, although Congressman Sherman will be with us, hopefully. He's got a vote, so hopefully he can make it. We'll be right back. Welcome back, 15 minutes past the hour. And Mark Taylor-Canfield in Seattle. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Good to talk to you again.
Thank you. Good to talk to you. What's going on?
Well, best wishes to you and your family in 2016.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I've been reporting at the newly rebirthed Seattle Star newspaper and also at a new independent media group called Democracy Watch News about two pretty frightening stories coming out of Washington State. One, the Washington State Supreme Court is holding our state legislature in contempt of court and fining the state legislature $100,000 per day for their failure to adequately fund public education.
Whoa.
Requirements.
Do the Republicans run the House or Senate in Washington State?
The Republican majority in the Senate and the Democrats have a thin majority in the House. So we have an education crisis, and the Governor Jay Inslee and the state legislature have refused to call a special session. They're going to be reconvening on January 11th. But in the meantime, $100,000 per day is accruing as a fine in our own state legislatures being held in contempt of court. But the story that's really shocking is the fact that Seattle and Martin Luther King Jr. County have had to declare a civil emergency due to the increase in homelessness. Homelessness has increased in King County of 23% over the last year. There are tent cities popping up everywhere, Tom, and I've come to calling them economic refugee camps because Seattle has the fastest increasing rents in the country. There is no rent control because our Washington State legislature also has a statewide prohibition on any kind of rent control in the state. So 10,000 people in Martin Luther King Jr. County, the metropolitan Seattle area, 10,000 people are without permanent housing right now.
Wow.
It's just
how many of those folks, Mark, are recently indigenous? Are actual Seattle residents versus people who have come there from other parts of the country where the weather's so cold that being homeless is beyond miserable.
Well, we do have this IT gold rush going on, which the population increase in Seattle is reaching the Yukon gold rush proportions, but most of the people who are homeless are residents of the city who have been displaced because of the lack of affordable housing. And even with the $15 an hour minimum wage, which is being phased in, when people's rents are going up 100% or more, and people are paying $1,000 a month for a 200 square foot micro unit apartment, there's just no way to sustain.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing in D.C. as gentrification rolls along. In our case, it's fueled by the Supreme Court saying it's illegal to own a politician. In your case, it's the IT boom. Remarkable. Mark Taylor-Canfield. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Tom. Have a good year.
You too. Happy New Year. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Martin O'Malley, I don't think he's got a chance. They just announced that you've got to have 5% to get into the next debate, which is going to be in a couple of weeks. And Martin O'Malley is not pulling 5% anywhere except in Utah, I believe, in one state. And so he's going to have to start working really seriously to hang on to that. And it may evaporate as time goes on. We'll see. Or it may strengthen. I was personally somewhat underwhelmed by him and by his campaign. I mean, we make it fairly clear to politicians that, if they've got something to say and they want to come on this program, if they're willing to be challenged, in a reasonable way. I don't just put people on and then call them names. I mean, people are welcome to come on this program, whether they agree or disagree. But Mr. O'Malley has not been back, and Mrs. Clinton has not taken the opportunity at all. So, which I think is unfortunate. 58 facts about the U.S. economy from last year, 2015, that are almost too crazy to believe. Michael Snyder wrote this for the Economic Collapse, the Economic Collapse blog.com. And it's pretty astonishing. 62% of all Americans have less than $1,000 in their savings account. 21% of Americans have no savings account whatsoever. Fewer than 10% of millennials and only 16% of Gen Xers have more than 10 grand saved up. 43% of all American households spend more than they make every month, which means that 43% of American households are continually getting more and more in debt. For the first time ever, the middle class of America now makes up a minority of the population. Back in 71, it was 61% of Americans. According to the Pew Research Center, the median income of middle-class households declined by 4% just over the last 14 years, just since George Bush became president. Median wealth for middle-class households dropped an astonishing 28% just over the last 15 years. So if people's wealth is dropping 28%, middle-class households, their wealth, that's, what they've got stashed away or the value of their home, things like that. Part of that, of course, is the drop in housing values. But part of it is that, wages haven't been keeping up. And people are going deeper in debt. There are still 900,000 fewer middle-class jobs in America than there were when the recession began in 2008. Many of them have been replaced by minimum wage jobs. For each of the past 6 years, more businesses have closed in the United States than have opened. Prior to 2008, this had never happened before in the entire history of the United States. And this is why we wrote the crash of 2016. The crash of 2016 just kind of lays out all this stuff and says, we've got a serious structural problem here. And if we don't roll back Reaganomics, and for that matter, frankly, Clintonomics, if we don't roll this stuff back and go back to Keynesian economics that we were operating under from 1933 until 1981, if we don't go back to Keynesian economics, you can kiss the middle class goodbye. The top 0.1% of all American families have about as much wealth as the bottom 90%. The 20 wealthiest people in this country have more money than the poorest 152 million, poorest bottom half. This was an astonishing number for me, particularly speaking as somebody who moved out of I moved out of my parents' house when I was 16, and so did my wife, for them. And now, 48.8% of all 25-year-olds in America still live with their parents. About half of all 25-year-olds still live with their parents. It's amazing. In 2007, 1 out of every 8 children in America was on food stamps. Today, that was in 2007. Today, it's 1 out of every 5. Number of homeless children in the United States has increased by 60% just over the past 6 years. Now, I know the Republicans love to cite this and blame it on Obama, but I would clearly lay the blame for this at the foot of this austerity-driven Republican Congress. More than half of all students in our public schools qualify for public school lunches because they live below the poverty line. Today, the average U.S. household that has at least one credit card has approximately $16,000 in credit card debt. 41% of all working-age Americans either currently have medical bill problems or are paying off medical debt. Collection agencies are harassing 30 million of us right now. I am among them because my health insurance company will not pay for an emergency room visit, which was a perfectly legitimate visit. And this just makes me crazy. The Economic Collapse blog.com, another piece by Michael Snyder. He says, did you know that there are 5 too-big-to-fail banks in the United States that each have exposure to derivative contracts in excess of $30 trillion? The U.S. big banks, the 5 biggest too-big-to-fail banks, have $247 trillion in exposure to derivatives right now. Now, for context, The entire world economy is $65 trillion. And our five largest banks have $247 trillion worth of derivatives. That's nuts. I mean, that goes beyond nuts. That's nuts. Anyhow, Congressman Brad Sherman will be with us next, and I'll be taking your calls for the rest of the show. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls on this Anything Goes Friday, although Congressman Sherman will be with us, hopefully. He's got a vote, so hopefully he can make it. We'll be right back. Past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. 6 minutes past the hour. This is interesting. Connor Lynch wrote a piece over at salon.com. The headline is, it went up yesterday, actually, Thursday. Bill Clinton is a political liability. In a race against Bernie Sanders, his neoliberal legacy could be toxic. And it's a fascinating piece that suggests that while Bill Clinton's policies might have been very popular in the 90s, these are quite different times. And arguably that his policies were not at all progressive in the 90s, that they were simply, get along, go along with the banksters kind of thing. And, he's making the just right out there, right up front assertion that Bill, therefore, is harming Hillary by campaigning for her. I always wondered back when he was campaigning for Hillary 8 years ago against Barack Obama and made comments that many people of color took offense to. Something like, I don't remember his exact words, but it was to the effect of, he's a black guy, so he's got the black vote locked up, which absolutely was not the case. And, but, a lot of people were offended by that. I wondered back then, is he helping her or hurting her? I wonder now if he is. On the other hand, I look at the election of 2000 when Al Gore made the strategic choice not to ask for help from Bill Clinton. And of course, at that point, Bill Clinton was arguably more popular than he is now, or at least people knew who he was. I mean, that was at the very end of his presidential term. And Al Gore ran a campaign with no Bill Clinton. And, Jeb Bush and Katherine Harris, pushing 60,000 African Americans off the voting rolls in Florida, got George W. Bush within 500 votes within spitting distance of the election in Florida so that the Supreme Court could step in and hand the election to George W., even though we know now that by any criteria, Al Gore won Florida. And nobody is talking about Jeb Bush's actual crime in Florida, which, to the best of my knowledge, is still being litigated. But anyway. So I'm curious, do you think that Bill is going to help Hillary or not? I honestly don't know. I think that probably he's helping her. But I could be wrong. I just don't know. I do want to make sure that if Hillary is our nominee, she is also our president. On the other hand, I also want to make sure that if Bernie Sanders is our nominee, he is also our president. So we'll see where this goes. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. According to Leader Fan in our chat room, tonight at 8:30 Eastern Time, Senator Sanders is going to join democracyforamerica.com for a conference call. You can RSVP. It's up at the top. It's one of the top banner stories and links at democracyforamerica.com. That's the organization that used to be Dean for America. And then when Howard Dean was no longer running for president, his brother Jim took it over, renamed it as Democracy for America, and has turned it into one of the better progressive activist training sites and groups. They do these workshops all over the country, teaching people how to be activists and progressive activists, how to successfully run. So anyhow, it's interesting. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Congressman Brad Sherman is on the line. And it's pretty astonishing. 62% of all Americans have less than $1,000 in their savings account. 21% of Americans have no savings account whatsoever. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just a quick FYI, by the way, at the bottom of the next hour, at what'll be 1:30 Eastern time, Congressman Brad Sherman from California is going to be on. We're going to be talking about this massive methane leak out there, this volcano that is erupting as a result of the Southern California Gas Company not bothering to put a shutoff valve back into place back in the 70s, I guess it was, the last time they did repair work on this pipe, on this well. So anyhow, just an FYI. According to Leader Fan in our chat room, tonight at 8:30 Eastern Time, Senator Sanders is going to join democracyforamerica.com for a conference call. You can RSVP. It's up at the top. One of the top banner stories and links at democracyforamerica.com. That's the organization that used to be Dean for America. And then when Howard Dean was no longer running for president, his brother Jim took it over, renamed it as Democracy for America, and has turned it into one of the better progressive activist training sites and groups. They do these workshops all over the country, teaching people how to be activists and progressive activists, how to successfully run. So anyhow, it's interesting. Those trolls, these largely young white men who are experiencing, some variation in their emotional state for the day. Particularly anonymity on the internet gives these people what they view as, license to be total fools. But your message will still get through, even when it's ridiculed. And so, let me encourage you, not just you, anybody who's posting, who's talking about the truth. When the trolls come back on you, expect an explosion of trolls over the next 10 months. Because we're now in the election season, and there are outside groups, political parties, and political campaigns that are paying people or enlisting volunteers to simply be trolls. And then B, you've got a lot of people who are just kind of polarized by it, who are just activated by it, who really, really like Hillary Clinton, or really, really like Bernie Sanders, or really, really like Ted Cruz, or really, really like Donald Trump. And they're going out and they're trashing everybody else's site. But still, when you're telling the truth, I believe at the end of the day, the truth comes through. Sheila, thank you for the call. And thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the end. Documented human rights violations by private prisons. Members of the African Black Coalition met with university officials about divestment
There's still much work to be done to end our nation's racist incarceration policies, but with groups like this leading the way, we really can change this broken system. And that's the way it is for the week of January 4th, 2016. I'm Thom Hartmann on the Economic and Labor News. But anyway, so I you need to know this. As of the end of last October, super PACs and outside groups had already spent well over $200 million on the 2016 presidential race. And many experts suspect that actual spending far exceeds that amount. Now, thanks to the Federal Election Commission, candidates will have a much easier time helping those groups solicit and spend all that campaign cash. According to a recent article over at commondreams.org, the FEC has removed a little-known rule that kept candidates from asking people to donate to their super PACs. Just before Christmas, the FEC released a new opinion which said that candidates are no longer barred from soliciting donations as long as they meet with donors in very small groups. No, really. As Matea Gold, the Washington Post, explained, candidates are now permitted to meet privately with donors and super PAC operatives to talk about fundraising. Ms. Gold wrote, quote, all that is required under the guideline is a written invitation, a formal program, and a disclaimer that the candidate is appearing as a, quote, special guest who is not, quote, soliciting large checks. The FEC issued this opinion in response to two Democratic super PACs, but that didn't stop two of the left-leaning members of the commission from speaking out against that recent commission decision. FEC Commissioner Ellen Weintraub told the Washington Post, this is actually very dangerous if you're worried about corruption, the notion that these kind of small backroom meetings can take place. She added, the fewer people you have in the room, the fewer protections you have against something unsavory happening. And she's exactly right. A small meeting with a formal invite doesn't prevent corruption. It makes unethical and possibly illegal collusion, frankly, far more likely. This is yet another example of why we must continue to fight to overturn Citizens United and put our democracy back in the hands of those who can't afford to meet privately with presidential candidates. Let's get money out and get back control of our elections. While some of our federal agencies go after the for-profit college companies that screw over students, our U.S. banking regulators are doing their part to stand up for college kids. Late last month, both the Federal Reserve and the FDIC ordered the financial firm Hire One Holdings to fork over millions because of their deceptive marketing about student loans. According to a recent article over at Huffington Post, Hire One provides colleges with loan disbursement services so that students can pay for books and living expenses. But that company neglected to provide students with any information about how they could get their loan money without signing up for a Hire One account. And they conveniently left out information about the fees associated with their one-account debit card. Although the company's CEO, Mark Scheinbaum, says that they've already made changes to address the issue, Hire One will have to pay out millions in restitution and fines for their deceptive practices. Thankfully, our banking officials have made it clear that they won't allow that kind of deception to continue. Despite what you may hear from Republicans, a new study shows that raising restaurant workers' wages does not lead to job losses. According to new research from Cornell University's School of Hotel Administration, small increases in restaurant workers' pay does not negatively affect profits or hiring. In order to test their theory, researchers studied 2 decades of federal and state minimum wage increases for tipped and regular workers. Although the National Restaurant Association claims that higher pay would force business owners to cut hours, limit hiring, or increase prices, the data show that claim is simply false. As many of us have explained all along, businesses, including restaurants, can afford to pay workers more. Now that we have the data, it's time to demand that all of our food service workers get a raise. Next time a Capital One commercial asks you what's in your wallet, hopefully you can answer with enough cash to pay off your Capital One account. According to a stunning new report from ProPublica, that company files a disturbing number of lawsuits against cardholders who get behind on small amounts of debt. Although the report found that numerous banks filed lawsuits in the wake of the 2008 recession, Capital One filed more than 500,000 lawsuits a year in the time that followed 2008. And that company filed suits over much smaller debts than other banks. ProPublica reports that Capital One's average lawsuit in 2013 in the state of New Jersey was for only $1,500. In comparison, the average suit of other banks was more than 3 times that amount. Capital One's excessive interest rates of up to 25% left many unable to pay. However, lawsuits allow the company to recoup most of their losses and write off the rest. Using our court system to harass the poor is just another way that companies rake in corporate welfare and harm consumers. And it's time the Capital One is investigated for filing excessive suits. And finally, the University of California school system is divesting $25 million from the private prison industry. Thanks to the work of black advocacy groups on campus, the university system will sell their shares in controversial companies like Geo Group Incorporated and Corrections Corporations of America. In the wake of numerous documented human rights violations by private prisons, members of the African Black Coalition met with university officials about divestment. There's still much work to be done to end our nation's racist incarceration policies, but with groups like this leading the way, we really can change this broken system. And that's the way it is for the week of January 4th, 2016. I'm Thom Hartmann on the Economic and Labor News.